Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to tell you that the best just got even better. This video is gonna cover everything you need to know about the brand new Mach6 sail range. I was one of a few windsurfers who received my brand new Mach6 sails, and in this video I am going to share my whole experience with you guys of my sail range that I had the opportunity of testing in the whole range of different wind conditions. So if you are one of the people who are still sitting on the wire and still considering whether to upgrade to the new Mach6 range, this video will give you some clarity on that. Do you guys still remember this video I made about how to widen your wind range? Still to date, I get people giving me feedback on how this whole concept changed their total windsurfing experience and career. The reason why I made that video was during COVID time, it turned into a logistical nightmare to get my new sails all the way to South Africa. So, like many of you guys, I was left stranded with only two sail sizes, my 7.0 and my 5.5, and I had to go through a whole Langebaan season with these two sizes. As you guys may know, here in Langebaan, we get all kinds of wind and water conditions. From super flat, light wind, pristine sailing to extreme 40 knot plus choppy, windy, stormy conditions. For me personally, getting around with only two sail sizes has been the greatest learning curve of my entire windsurfing career. During this time, I learned how to fine-tune my gear and how to maximize each and every sail size to be able to take on a much wider wind range. This year, Severne brought out the Mach6 sail range with exactly this new concept. So the first obvious change is the reduced amount of sail sizes available. The 5.5, the 6.5, 7.5 and 8.5. This was a brilliant move from Severne. Not only because the average person buying windsurf gear cannot necessarily afford to have a massive wide range of different sail sizes, but also because in an actual racing situation, you don't constantly want to have the need to swap between sail sizes all the time. Simplifying gear has been my motto so far in all the disciplines I take part in, whether it is speed sailing, wave sailing, or slalom sailing. The more time you spend on minimum amount of sizes, the more you get to know that gear combination, and the more you are in tune with fine-tuning methods in order to optimize that sail for the whole wide range of wind conditions. For me, when you are in control and when you are comfortable, that is when you really perform at your highest and fastest level. Now I have gone from 5 sail sizes down to 3, the 5.5, the 6.5 and the 7.5. There is this preconceived idea that racing sails, the Mach sails, are only for those who are competing on a professional level within the windsurfing world and not for recreational sailors. But I am really here to debunk that whole myth, because Severne designs these race sails that makes it possible for a super lightweight female to sail with exactly the same sail design as a big male figure. If you can nail down fine-tuning skills, your sailing stance, and the decision-making process in which sail size to pair with which board and fin size, whether you are a lightweight sailor or a heavyweight sailor, you are going to have an absolute blast and reap the full benefit of these racing machines from Severne. During this time in Europe, I've had experienced the whole range of different sailing conditions. So this was the perfect opportunity for me to use all of these three sail sizes in a wide variety of conditions and racing scenarios. Kirosh Kiani, the marketing manager of Severne, was present at the PWA. He helped me to fine-tune and explain all the changes that they applied to this new Mach6 sail range. And by the time he was done explaining to me all the changes they have made, I was so excited to get out onto the water, no matter how light that Lake Garda wind was. Looking at it, my first impression was Severne really perfected the profile of these new Mach6 sails. Taking a sail straight out of the bag and rigging it up for the first time is always for me a very good test, because there's absolutely no need for me to make any adjustments on the sail, whether to put in more spacers or change cambers. The sail rigs perfectly from out of the package. At the PWA, the wind was ranging between 6 to 9 knots. Being the only girl on fin between the whole fleet of foils meant that I had my work cut out for me. Initially, looking at the conditions, I thought to myself, there is no way that I'm going to even be able to plane during these races. Also the fact that that water is fresh water, and I come from a saltwater background, that has a massive impact in the time it takes to get onto a plane and the amount of lift that you can achieve on the fin. I used the 7.5 to race the whole PWA. I paired it with my 128 litre AV Modena slalom board and my 42 Mega X gas well fin.
Because, I mean, from where I come from, it's such high winds always, never really need to cross over to foil. Mm-hmm. So I'm literally representing the fin community here.
Motivated to get on the foil after this event when you go back home, or you still like, no?
I can really see why it's necessary in Europe, because I can see the conditions here, really, it's perfect foiling conditions. Yeah. I think that maybe in future, but my main focus is really high wind speed.
Well, there's definitely a few people out there who want you to represent the fin. That's what there's some hardcore fin sailors. They're like, so I think you're doing a good job.
Thanks so much, yes.
There was not one race that I had to sit out, wait out or bob out. I could fully take part in each and every single race with the fleet of foils. Being able to get so quickly onto the plane in such little wind on fresh water was mind-blowing for me. The sail felt extremely light, very responsive, and the rotation happened effortlessly. These are three big elements for me that's super important as a lightweight windsurfer, especially when you are competing against a fleet of foils. Being able to keep up with the fleet meant that I had to nail my jibes, get onto the plane as quick as possible, and not lose too much speed in the low wind sections of the course. I really contribute so much of my success during these races towards the new Mach6 7.5 racing sail. The sail is designed with a higher luff curve. So that means when you rig the sail and you downhaul it, the mast bends slightly more. It increases the skin tension. With that increased skin tension combined with the wider profile of the sail, that gives you extra backhand pressure. The sail was super responsive and very stable. These were the main design elements that contributed to planing effortlessly in suboptimal winds. With the advanced entry profile, all the wind that hits that sail is optimally distributed into speed, acceleration and power. That extra bit of backhand power is vital for accelerating through the jibes and also to be able to lock your position, keep the sail stability so that the sail doesn't twitch sideways. One of the key characteristics for me about a racing sail, for the whole sailing enjoyment aspect of it, is the ease by which the sail rotates after the jibe. I never want to have to shake a sail or really have to pump it hard in getting the sail to rotate, especially in the super light winds. Because the winds were so light, I used the 128 litre AV board to have enough flotation, especially in a fleet situation. Optimally, I would use my 7.5 here in Langebaan in a bit higher winds with a smaller board like a 118 litre AV Modena board. And obviously, because the water here is salt and not fresh, the 38 would be for me a nice match. Moving on to the DEFI wind, where my 5.5 was my first weapon on the race course. Super nice powered. My kind of windy. My kind of conditions. Perfectly set up. 98 litre. Wow. 5.5. Super stoked. The 5.5 is one of my favorite sizes. This is what I spent 80% of my time during a season in South Africa on. What makes the DEFI a very good test for a sail and its wind range is the fact that on the start line and by the first jibe mark 10 kilometers down the line, the wind can vary with over 10 knots. That is an insanely complicated situation to rig for. So luckily I hit the jackpot with my chosen combo. The wind was predicted to vary between 20 to 35 knots that day. So I hauled out my 5.5 and my 98 litre AV board, paired that with the 34 Gaswell CHRL fin. This combo had me finishing as first female on fin and overall in 7th position in a fleet of 120 females, fins and foils combined. I was extremely impressed with this gear. I felt super stable on the water throughout the entire range of different wind conditions. The sail had immense amount of power for its size and of course its trademark feather lightness and ease of rotation. What really stood out for me is the stability of the 5.5. That extra bit of backhand power just gave me that extra edge that I needed to overtake people in this massive fleet of 1,400 windsurfers. The 5.5 is an absolute racing machine for high winds. The sail did all the work by itself as it was really able to breathe, and I could effortlessly maintain my locked racing stance and focus on overtaking the people in front of me. The 5.5 rigs on an RDM 400 mast. This means that the sail is extra light. It could be compared to the feeling of sailing with a wave sail. It uses each fragment of wind strength so well, and that Severne nailed by perfecting the design and the entry profile of that sail to not waste an increment of wind. The acceleration is like riding a Ferrari. It really gets you ahead of the pack on the start line and out of the chaos after the jibe marks in no time. For the next day's racing, I decided to rig my 6.5 as the wind seemed to be slightly lighter than the previous day. Normally I have a 6.2 that I would rig with an RDM 430 mast, where the bigger guys would use a standard 430 mast. Using an RDM mast has been key for me as a lightweight sailor. The ability of an RDM mast to flex, to open up, gives the sail softness, it gives it so much control, and it helps you to be able to hold that sail down in really strong gusts where it normally would overpower you. It helps to move together with the opening leech of the sail and enhance the twist profile so that excess power gets released without compromising your racing stance. So when I noticed that one would need way too many spaces in order to rig the sail with a RDM 430 mast, I hauled out the standard Apex 430 mast and rigged it exactly according to the spec. Luckily in the first race, the wind was not that strong, so I was perfectly rigged on the 6.5, the 98 litre AV board paired with my 34 Gaswell CHRL fin. I maintained on the same fin for in case that Tramontana decides it wants to pick up out of the blue. So that was my sort of high wind compromise. For the rest, I kept everything the same. And not once did I feel underpowered or overpowered.
So I just completed the second race. I was on my 6.5 and my 98 litre AV board with my 34 fin, perfectly rigged. I'm so glad that I sized one size up because the wind was a little bit lighter than yesterday, and I had an epic race. Even though I had a bit of a difficult start, everyone was aiming for the upwind side of the start line, so it was super crowded, super gusty, very little wind in the start block. So, but luckily I got once I got onto the plane and onto speed, I could overtake quite a few people, so I still managed to finish in the front part of the pack.
I was really impressed with the amount of control, power and speed I could maintain throughout this huge variety of different wind strengths on the course. What made this race especially challenging was the fact that the whole entire fleet of 1,400 windsurfers aimed to start more on the upwind side of the start line, which is by default my more favorite side to start on. This means I had an extremely boxed in start. No matter what I did to hit that line on the right time, I was totally boxed in by this massive fleet of sails. If it wasn't for my 6.5 who had my back, this race could have ended into a disaster. It's quite clear cut if you have a good start at the DEFI because you've got clear wind, clean water, and that has a huge impact on your speed throughout the race. But when you have a boxed in start, you have your work cut out for you throughout the entire race, and you really have to work very hard to overtake people. This sail had my back and felt like it did all the work for me, and I just had to focus on locking the wind and working the board and fin to my advantage. Because of that extra backhand power, I managed to power through a big section of the fleet that had me boxed in the start. And throughout the race, I was effortlessly overtaking people to finish once more in the front section of the fleet. This gave me so much confidence with the 6.5 that I actually decided to stay on this sail, despite the fact that the wind looked as though it picked up for the second race of that day. As I lined myself up for the start line, I noticed that this is going to be one hell of a race as the wind has picked up a massive amount, and I found myself in an absolute turmoil of overpowering conditions, people flying around, falling around, most of the fleet on 5.5, 6.2s. My goal suddenly changed from being in the top of the fleet to just being able to complete this race that's lying ahead of me on the 6.5. I thought to myself, well, this is going to be very interesting. I decided to do speed sailing style, release the outhaul, push my body over the board, lock into a proper sailing stance and hope for the very best. I was kind of anticipating multiple catapults when I released that outhaul. Going fast was obviously a no-brainer in those strong 35 knot gusts, but being able to maintain control was key to surviving the race on an endurance and strength level. So when you do a long distance race like that, it's not always about being the fastest on course. It's about sailing effectively to endure the entire race and making clever decisions along the way. Me and my 6.5 were a winning team. We successfully finished that race somewhere in the front section of the fleet. For a brand like Severne to design a 6.5 that a girl with my weight can hold down in 30 to 35 knots, that says a lot about the fine design work that went into creating this masterpiece. I am so impressed with my 3 Mach6 racing sails, and I can't wait to get them out here in Langebaan on the water. All in all, the characteristics that really stands out for me about the whole new Mach6 range is the lightness, the ease of sail rotation, the stability and control, the added backhand pressure, the ability of the sail to open up at the leech and release power effectively, the ease at which these sails can be rigged, and these design aspects all in all created sails with a mightily increased low-end performance and a higher top speed. This is a game changer for each and every Severne sailor. I'm so excited for the brand moving forward. I think this marks a new design high for the Severne brand. What really stands out for me about Severne, I use the exact same sails that the big guys use. And with fine-tuning techniques and careful sail size choice, I can have the same amount of enjoyment in the same wind conditions as everyone else in the fleet. This is a huge confidence boost for the lightweight sailors and females in the sport. A few specific tips that I can give when rigging your Mach6 sail range. When pulling downhaul, I found that you can set the extension one size bigger than the spec. The sail stretches quite a bit after the first, second and third races, so it gives you room to properly downhaul the sail. Severne has a completely new panel layout, which is designed to improve the downhaul tension. So because of that increased luff curve in the sail and a resulting higher skin tension, it becomes even more important to fine-tune the batten tension. The 3 bottom buttons should be really tight. It gives the sail that extra edge and power. Then moving up to the top, the batten tension must be looser to allow for that leash to open up and release excess power. This high skin tension gives you so much responsiveness and stability. Remember after the second and third session to tighten the buttons further, because you'll see how much the sail actually stretch in the first few sessions. You need to keep that batten tension up in order to maintain the ideal profile in the sail belly. And as I've shown myself once more, the outhaul must be very loose. When you lay your sail on the grass, fully downhauled, the outhaul must be so loose that your sail properly touches the boom. Do not worry when it looks so loose on the land. Once you get onto the water, the power of the wind will focus towards the luff side and the sail will set right into its profile naturally. So you will not be struggling with a sail that's going to bulge over the boom. The best place to set your outhaul is actually on the water while you sail. The sail must lightly touch parts of the backhand side of the boom. Lastly, don't overlook the massive impact it can have just by changing the clue hole setting from the top, middle to bottom. When the winds are really strong, move the clue setting right down to the bottom hole so that your whole sail opens up and twists to release that excess power. When you're in super light winds and you want to harness each and every increment of wind power, move the clue hole right to the top one so that it opens the sail less and more power is harnessed into the sail. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to ask me any questions, anything that's unclear about the Mach6 sail range, and I'll be more than happy to help. Remember to subscribe to my channel to stay tuned with all my coming videos.